Linda, some people say the mountaineers can be great climate ambassadors. Do you really agree to that notion?
I think climbers should be ambassadors and witnesses for climate change. Today, they have been in the past, and they've been very, very effective. John Muir is an example, and he used his awareness of the mountains and how he saw changes happening to them to inspire a whole generation and future generations to protect mountain regions. He was an active climber and mountaineer. He was just one man, but he was able to take the message that he had, the information he had received from his travels in the mountains, to people who could make a difference. President Theodore Roosevelt, other important people in politics and government, to convince them to help him protect these areas. I think mountaineers are very good at that because they can bring back from the mountains evidence and stories about how these places are being shaped and impacted, in some places destroyed by changes such as climate change impacts on mountains today. So that was in the early 20th century. Now we have a new century and new impacts that we're seeing and needing to respond to. And I think mountaineers are amongst the best people to start speaking up about this, because this is sort of our part of the world. This is the part of the world we know the best and can speak about. And what we need to do is start speaking to others about this, the changes that we're seeing, politicians, people who can make change and help us to respond to these changes effectively.
Back home here in Nepal, we see Dawa, Steven Serpa and Apa Serpa. They have been great ambassadors for climate change. The challenge to us looks like is how to take this forward to the next level. How can we engage? Of course, as you said, they can be great ambassadors, but what is stopping them? How is it possible for us to actually approach them and convince them and get them on board to be the real climate ambassadors? It's not for the Himalayas, but for probably the mountains all over the world.
It's simple. You just have to ask them. I think they're already probably very aware of these changes and committed to doing something, but unless they are approached or given an idea or contacted by a group and asked to speak up and share their experiences and visions and ideas of what these impacts are, then they will make a difference. Usually they're not the most proactive people. Sometimes they are, but often they're not. They're busy with other things. But when they are asked to, as it has happened in the past, they do respond, and they can become some of the most convincing people to speak about this. So what we need to do is put the word out, really engage with these mountaineers, ask them to think about what they've seen, what they'd like to do to help us respond effectively to climate change, and to join us in making a difference.
And the other issue that comes to mind is also about them probably playing an ambassadorial kind of a role for the mountain communities in general, because there is a lot of noise about people suffering in the seashore areas and the small island states from the impacts of climate change. But compared to that, not much is talked about globally about the sufferings of the mountain communities, which any mountaineer can vouch is no less than people even living in the seashore areas or small island states. We really, people living in the mountain communities, they need ambassadors, and probably the mountaineers can be those ambassadors. What's your views on that, and do you think it's a practical proposition for them to play an active role in bringing together an alliance of mountain communities on advocating climate change issues across the globe?
Yes, I do, but again, it's because mountaineers know these communities. They're usually places like Chamonix or Yosemite Valley or other areas that have mountain cities that are close to them or villages in them. They've been there, they've enjoyed the villages and the people there, they've seen the impacts there. So yes, they should, I think, work together to, amongst mountaineers of the world, connect also with these communities that are emblematic of the mountains and are relying on mountains for their economy and their livelihoods. Also, in relation to island nations, certainly it's very scary to think of sea level rise in their case, but think also about losing fresh water for a great bit of the planet if we allow climate change to impact mountains so that we're losing our glaciers. and seasonal watersheds. This is happening even in our mountains in California with Sierra Nevada. We have snow in the winter, which we rely on for the rest of the year. So yes, I think mountaineers can engage amongst themselves, but they must engage with the mountain communities. They themselves, those communities, are also emblematic and charismatic in a way too, because these are often resort cities or places people go for vacations and enjoy and also appreciate. So those communities talking together can probably solve their problems faster because they're sharing ideas, best practices, responses, adaptation techniques, things like that. So I would encourage the mountain communities to start their network as well in the conversation and use that as a path to find better and more effective ways to respond to climate change.
How would such an alliance be effective? Because Alps, as you know, is actually a lot of wealthy countries around Alps. Rockies mountains, as you know, are also a lot of wealthy communities around it, whereas in the Andes and the Himalayas, people are not so well off economically. So if we think of creating such an alliance of mountain communities across the globe, will that be a real feasible thing? Because it looks like there is a lot of economic disparities among the people living in different parts of the world in the mountains, and that will have ramifications for their ability to adapt to climate change.
Yes, and it's true that there are many beautiful and very developed mountain resort cities and areas in some parts of the world, in the developed countries perhaps. That's fine. It's a fun experience for some people, and certainly it's a very good economic part of the local economies. That's fine. But most people who have been to those places want to see more. They want to see more mountains, and maybe they're more interested in seeing the less developed parts of mountains, being a little bit different, going a little beyond the already developed areas to the less developed areas. And that's where mountains like the Himalayas or the Andes, which are less developed commercially, fewer mountain towns, have a draw for people from the developed world because they're trying to see something different and see something more wild and original and indigenous to those areas, to learn from them, to get a better appreciation for how they live in the mountain world there. So yeah, I think that having both is the way to go, and it's not always that the developed mountain towns and resorts will have the information to give to the less developed areas. I think in many cases we're going to find that the less developed villages, indigenous people there, will have more to give to resorts. So I think in that conversation we might find some pleasant surprises.
The Himalayan Climate Initiative is basically a non-profit based in the Himalayas, and here we're talking about a global alliance of mountain communities around climate change. Is it really practicable for an agency in the Himalayas to actually lead such an effort globally?
Yes, and I think it's very appropriate because if you have a big problem like climate change impacts on mountains around the world, the best way to address that and make a difference is to start where the biggest impacts are occurring, or the biggest impacts on humans are occurring because of this. And clearly the number one area would be the Himalayas, because again their waters and snows provide fresh water to billions of people. So this, I think, should be the starting point. Secondly, this area is very attractive to people for its natural beauty. There's so much of it, and the cost of coming here and trekking through this area is really low compared to other places. So I think it offers a good convening place for this kind of discussion. I think the Himalaya could be sort of a summit area that people would come together from around the world to speak about this issue. You're in the number one place of need, and you have a very hospitable and popular place that people would like to come to. So I think this would be a great place to start.
In the end, Linda, do you have any appeal to make to the, because you yourself you have been a climber, a mountaineer yourself, and do you have a particular appeal that you want to make to the mountaineers, the climbers all across the globe for such an initiative to come together for a larger cause like climate change?
Yes, I do. I would encourage mountaineers and climbers to remember their legacy, which is to be the leaders in conservation around the world. The first warning signs are usually voiced by climbers, and climbers have always been people who passionately understand these problems and start speaking up about them, keep speaking up about them, and make a difference. So we may have periods where things are not in such crisis, but there have been periods when there are, and this is one of them. In fact, this is one of the most important crisis times. We need the mountaineers and climbers of the world to again come together, find their voice, unify their voice, start speaking amongst each other, getting mountain communities involved in speaking together, and extend this discussion out to governmental, civil society, and business like tourism. I think this is all the kinds of stakeholders we need in this conversation. I think it's entirely appropriate and doable by the mountaineers and climbers of the world.